Hello and welcome to Spotlight on Education. I'm Dr. Jon Kopko, Superintendent of the East Brunswick Public Schools and your host for the program. Today we've prepared what I think a very, very interesting and informative program, and our very, very special guest is Dr. Ken Burnett. Ken will be retiring from the East Brunswick Public School system after almost 40 years of service to this community and to the students. And Ken, I'd like to say welcome and congratulations on a very, very distinguished career that you've had in this school district and that you're still enjoying.
Well, thank you very much, John.
I would like to ask you if you could think back, back over those some 40 years and talk a little bit about what your first position was and what the district was like back then.
I came to East Brunswick in the school year of 1954-1955. I came down to complete a year of fifth grade self-contained classroom for a teacher who had become pregnant. And that's one of the differences. In those days, when a female teacher became pregnant, she was expected to leave the classroom rather quickly. But I arrived here in East Brunswick in January of 1955 and completed the year for her. For the next year, I continued to teach at the central school. I think the next year I had a 7th and an 8th grade when I was then drafted into the United States Army. East Brunswick in those days was almost more a rural community than a suburban community. A few of the developments had begun along Route 18. Area called Windsor Park, I remember, was sprouting. The area around Central School, Merrill Avenue, was being built. But in my first classroom, I had as many farm children, or children of farmers, as I did new suburbanites. Route 18 was a 2-lane highway, and there was not a shopping center in sight.
And when did you first become principal?
I first became a vice principal in 1962, serving at Hammersholt School from 62 to 65. My first principalship was the Lawrenceburg School, going there in the 65-66 school year.
And as you assess the principalship back then and what it is today, have there been changes in the responsibilities?
Yeah, most certainly. Of course, some things have remained constant. When I took over as principal of Lawrenceburg School, there was basically me and the teachers, a couple of custodians and a couple of cooks. Specialized personnel and support personnel were virtually unheard of. There was no library or a librarian. There was no remedial programs. There was no talented and gifted programs or programs for the enrichment of any students. So I found myself then as a principal being very much a jack of all trades. If a student needed some counseling, both positive stroking perhaps a little stronger, you were the person who did it. You observed all the teachers, evaluated them, met with the parents, and tried to straighten out as many problems as you could. I always remember I left Lawrenceburg to become principal of the high school and was there 5 years, and then at the main office for almost 5 years. And I returned to an elementary school in the late 70s, and the changes that had occurred in that 10-year period in terms of support personnel and programs was simply staggering to me, and took quite a bit of adjustment. When I came back, and I was then at Memorial School, I found that my job had changed to a very great extent from actually doing these things to now directing and managing and coordinating it being done by other personnel. The one respect I think it remained constant was I still feel the principal remains the educational leader for the building, and it's very much his role to set and maintain goals and directions for the building and hopefully get the staff working with you in that vein.
As you mentioned, you were principal in several of our schools in the school district. Could you share with our audience what those schools were and maybe how they differed?
Okay, in order if I can, only because it'll keep me from perhaps forgetting some. As I said, vice principal of Hammersholt School, then principal of the Lawrenceburg School, principal of East Brunswick High in the early 70s, and then about 5 years at the main office. Then principal of the Memorial School for 4 years, principal of Hammersholt School for only a year, and principal of the Frost School for the past 8 years. How have they been like? or different? I don't know. I think the main differences I sensed were the ones I responded to before, that as the district changed and programs changed and the organization changed, the job to a very great extent changed. I think the biggest change for me was going from the Lawrenceburg School, which was an elementary school of about 550 pupils at that time, to the high school, which was a school of almost 2,500 pupils at that time. And I remember going in there, and of course I was much younger than those days, and I was very much certain that I was going to turn this place around and head in a positive educational direction, and quickly found out that you don't do that to an organization of 2,500 students and 125 teachers in quite the same way you do with an elementary school with perhaps 25 teachers and 500 students. So adjusting to working with a large organization took a great deal of getting used to and learning. And again, I guess it was learning that your job in that role is more to inspire, direct, and coordinate others. I imagine much the same role that you found as a superintendent if they're coming from a principalship.
You also mentioned your position in central office. Could you tell us what that position was and really compare it to a principalship?
Yeah.
How did it differ?
In the little past 4 years that I was at the main office, I think I had at least 3 and perhaps 4 different titles. As you know, our district has been prone toward reorganization, at least at the central office levels, and that's been going on for a considerable time. Basically, however, my role was that of assistant superintendent or coordinator for curriculum and program. And basically my job was to assess the curricular programs, to hopefully coordinate and integrate them so that there was a continuity K through 12, to evaluate programs, to introduce new programs, and also to eliminate ones where there seemed to be a multiplicity of purpose or a conflict with other things. I remember once, a number of years ago, someone asked me what my job at the main office was like. And a thought sort of came to me that it was sort of akin to leading elephants through minefields, in that you had an idea or you had a new program which you hoped to implement. In case you haven't discovered, East Brunswick is somewhat of a political animal, and there are a fair number of people and groups out there who have pretty strong ideas of what should and should not happen in East Brunswick public schools, so that my role there, I think, was sort of hopefully guiding this idea or germ of an idea through the various levels and groups of administrators, teachers, the union, until hopefully it was accepted and put into some operational form. I find the job of a school building principal is much more pragmatic and practical. There it's not how you get something through, it's how you implement something, and I think for that reason your rewards and satisfactions are a little more immediate.
Obviously, over almost 4 decades, you've seen a lot of program changes. You've seen some changes that have been permanent. You've seen some changes that were temporary. There's some that really stand out significantly in your mind as being most significant.
Yeah. I think the first 15 years that I was here in East Brunswick, our sole or major thrust was simply accommodating the number of children in a district that I guess grew from perhaps 50 teachers to 500 in a 10-year period, and from at the most a few thousand students to almost 10,000. And in that growth, and also I might add, there certainly was a decided attempt to develop and maintain a quality educational program, but you simply just didn't have the time to keep up with all the demands made upon you for presenting that. So I always remember when I got to the main office, which was about 1975, discovering that in 9 different elementary schools, we had 10 different reading programs in operation, 3 different science programs, at least 2 and perhaps as many as 4 math programs. So that for the past 15 years, the thrust and what has made the most major impression upon me has been the development and into a much more unified school district with continuous programs, K through 12, with a consistency of program from one school to another. And seeing it develop in that direction, and certainly I think developing into one of the better school districts in the state of New Jersey, has been a very satisfying experience for me.
You know, I'd really like to obtain some insight from you regarding our need to expand our facilities here in the school district due to increasing enrollment, because there have been times when individuals have asked me, why in the world would we need to expand our school buildings and our facilities, because they do remember back to the 1970s when the schools housed approximately 10,000 students. How would you respond to that question?
Yeah. Well, it's really ultimately rather simple. As I indicated before, when I took over the high school, there was a population of almost 2,500 pupils. I would imagine the pupil population up there now is somewhere between 1,600 and 1,700 pupils. And a number of factors come into mind, the most obvious being class size. As principal of a high school, we aimed for an ideal class size of 25 to 30 students, but I would have guessed that more than half of the ones, particularly the more common subjects like English and social studies, class sizes were frequently 30 and 35 students. I in fact remember back in the late 60s when we convinced the Board of Education to set the first maximum class size for an elementary school room, and if I remember, the first maximum class size was 38. In other words, we let an elementary class grow to 38 pupils before we attempted to do something to alleviate that problem. And if you have 50 elementary classrooms out there and you do nothing more than reduce that class size from 38 to 28, you're talking about 500 pupils and a significant number of classrooms. My impression is nowadays residents in East Brunswick are even uncomfortable with a class size of 28 and want very much to see their children going to classes where there are no more than 25 pupils in a class, and certainly in some of the lower primary sessions, perhaps keeping them around 20 or 21 students. So simply just reducing class sizes had a very significant effect on the number of pupils we can accommodate. I think the second major factor is the number of substandard facilities we had in use. I remember as principal of the high school and as vice principal at Hammersholt School and principal of Lawrenceburg School, we had libraries operating in hallways and in lobbies. We had classrooms operating in closets. We had storage areas just literally being used as standard classrooms, and this practice continued for a number of years. It was while I was at the main office, we asked some representatives from the State Department of Education to come up and survey our facilities, and they presented a report, which is probably in file somewhere around here. But I think at the high school, it was slightly better than 50 substandard facilities in regular use as instructional spaces. And taking these away certainly greatly reduced the abilities to house those number of children. Lastly, I think the third or the last major factor which has greatly reduced our ability to house large numbers of children or this equal number of children in these buildings has been the state mandate in terms of program implementation. We now must, by law, supply ESL and bilingual classes to children who move into the community and have a second language as their native language. There are certainly numbers of special education programs that are now mandated, with facilities mandated and maximum class sizes also. And lastly, there's the whole basic skills program, which literally didn't exist back in the late 60s and the early 70s. All of these certainly create great demands for facilities and take away facility space which you could use as normal classroom space.
During your career here in East Brunswick, I'm sure you've had many, many, many interesting experiences. Could you share with our audience some of the more humorous ones?
Oh, certainly a great number of them relate to the things that happen with small children, as they are among the most creative people and engaging to work with. And one which comes to my mind occurred a number of years ago when in late June we experienced one of those 5 days of 95+ degree temperature. And I finally reached the point that I had stopped coming to school with my jacket, shirt, and tie on, and was in a short sleeve shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, and was walking down the hallway when a young lady came up to me and asked if the weather was going to turn cooler, was I going to begin wearing my principal's suit again. I think one other comes to my mind, and it's always remained in my mind with a certain amount of humor, but also because I think it sort of said something about the kind of community East Brunswick was. Back in the days I was working at the main office, we had 2 competing accelerated math programs going. One which began in the Churchill Junior High at that time, and the other began at the Hampshire Junior High. And of course, this produced a certain amount of inefficiency because we had to continue these programs up through 12th grade. And as is often the case with accelerated math programs, the class sizes would shrink through attrition, so that frequently at the 12th grade level, we would have 2 sections of accelerated math of different brands with no more than 4 or 5 children in each class. And of course, by this time, we were trying to make more efficient use of our buildings and our staff and so forth. So the mandate came down to me to look at the situation and come up with a recommendation as to which of the 2 programs we would continue. Well, things never become an easy matter in East Brunswick, as I'm sure you somewhat discovered. And when word got around that we were going to eliminate one of these programs, the community reaction was such that the board meeting was moved to the all-purpose room at Hammersholt School, where it seemed to me better than 300 people were there, all with their own very strong ideas as to which of the math programs we should continue. First of all, I was amused that so many people were there because we never had that many people enroll for the course to begin with. But for what seemed like 3 hours, one community member and one community group after another spoke on the benefits or disadvantages of the one program. And finally, after much grief, shouting, curses, threats, the board acted in all its wisdom to eliminate one of the programs. And as we were packing up, and I guess it was close to 11:30, 12 that night, one of the members of the community came up to me and commented. It was quite a meeting. I agreed with him. And he said, everyone has their own ideas as to what is the best thing to do for our children. And he stopped for a minute and he said, but you know, he says, no one will really know for about 20 years. And I thought that the man was very wise, and perhaps we should have had him speak first that evening.
How about some of your more rewarding experiences?
Oh, I think for me the most rewarding things which have happened over the years have come through the contact I've had now and then with adults who I knew as children in the district. And since I've lived in the community also for better than 30 years, I've had the opportunity to run into them sometimes 10, 15, or 25 years after my contact with them. And number one, the fact that they still recognized me and remembered me was rewarding in itself. But so often they'd say something like, gee, remember what a pain I was back there in 10th grade, or remember all the trouble I had, or do you remember doing this? And I guess the realization that I must have in some small way made a meaningful difference in that person's life has been a most rewarding thing.
What will you miss the most, and what will you miss the least?
Miss the most. Certainly miss the interaction with the many, many fine people. Not only the students, but the staff, the administrators, the parents I've come in contact with within the district. I think I'll miss the excitement. In fact, what will I miss least? My knee-jerk reaction, I think, was going to be some of the pressure that I've enjoyed over the years. But in some ways, I think that's one of the things I'll miss, because it has been an exciting community, and one in which there has been high demands and high expectations. There's also been the satisfaction of success, which has come from knowing you've maybe taken on a difficult job and managed to get it through.
What advice would you give to the new principal of Frost Elementary School?
Keep your head low. No, it certainly hasn't been that bad. I think listen. Listen to the people you're working with and the people you're working for. I feel very strongly that an organization is not a chart of relationships and people, but for very much almost a living thing. And what is most important to that organization is the process that it goes through as it changes, as it builds, as it reacts to the things which are brought upon it by the community.
Now that you're embarking on retirement, what are your plans for the future?
Well, my wife and I hope to be relocating slightly south of here. We are negotiating for the purchase of a house in Virginia. Those people that know us, I think, know we are golfers, and probably will not be surprised to learn that the house is on the 17th tee of a golf course. I also hope to be doing volunteer work. I feel I've been one of these people blessed in life, have enjoyed what I've done, have had no regrets over what I've done, and have pretty much done what I wanted to do. I still think I have some things to share with people, and hope I can still put some of that use in a voluntary effort.
Ken, I'd like to say thank you very much for being here with us today. As I mentioned before, you've truly had an outstanding and a distinguished career here in East Brunswick, and I think that this district is as successful as it is because of some of the many, many contributions that you've made. The impact that you've had on so many children here, many of which you probably won't even realize, but I'm sure there have been thousands and thousands that are just better citizens and perhaps better students because of how you did your job and how you performed your responsibilities here. So I'd like to say on behalf of everyone in East Brunswick Township, thank you and congratulations. And just personally for me, I really consider it a privilege and an honor to have had the opportunity to have worked with you. I've learned a lot of things from Dr. Ken Burnett, and I appreciate your support and loyalty and the work that you've done during my time here in East Brunswick. So once again, thank you very, very much. To our audience, I'd like to thank you for watching and hope you'll enjoy the show as much as we have today, and hope you'll be back with us again next month for another issue of Spotlight on Education.